And we are back, guys. Welcome to the newly named The Spawn podcast. It's a name I came up with mostly because you never know what conversation is going to spawn from this podcast at all. So we have a special guest in the house. It's actually something that I ran into through Bobby Roast Beef, Jigs and Bigs. Those guys started to affiliate with a company called Dark Horse Tackle. And I have one of the owners on the line. So I'm going to let him introduce himself and let him tell you about how he started fishing. And we'll go from there, guys.
Absolutely. Much appreciated, Mike. My name is Josh. I am the co-owner of Dark Horse Tackle. I work alongside Zach or Metal Jones on Instagram. Dark Horse Tackle is a monthly bass fishing subscription box, but it is custom tailored to everything being American small business. We've passed through a few owners, but here I still stand. And the whole dream of what Dark Horse Tackle is essentially the American dream, and being, you can start this yourself, you can do it, you can get there, you can get where you want to be. Fishing industry is, everybody knows the fishing industry right now. These guys are, they got more money than ideas, so they're just scrambling at everything. So we just, we find some American small businesses and a bunch of great guys that we work with or have bought from already, and we send it out to hundreds of people every single month. And I noticed that you're also a subscriber.
I am. I actually did. To be honest, I'll be fair. I subscribed initially because one of the main reasons I was telling PJ about this earlier is the draw for me is I'm a tinkerer. So I like to make my own plastics, but I also like to have something that the guy next to me doesn't.
Right.
And Dark Horse gives me that advantage because it exposes me to small bait makers that I've never heard of. The other thing is, as a content creator, I love doing unboxings, and it's really cool to me to unbox stuff that's not, oh, here's a Strike King buzzbait, and here's a KVD 1.5, and it's crap that everybody's seen 100 times, and those unboxings to me are boring because I have all of it in my tackle box. I don't need to see something that I could go to Dick's Sporting Goods and see on the shelf. So I like the idea of just getting involved with. I'm actually affiliated with a few, small bait makers and stuff like that too. And I like seeing the little guy get a chance. As a small YouTube channel, I appreciate the little guys, getting the opportunity.
That's what it's all about. And some companies we work with, they're not really little guys in the grand scheme of things. They've been around for a long time, but they're still an American small business. I mean, you look at literally the grand scheme. We've worked with Lake Fork Tackle. I see it on your wall there. We just worked with Picasso, who is also a very large brand. But at the same time, this stuff is still being made in-house. These guys are, they're paying their dues for this stuff to get made. They're making it themselves, or, they have found a small facility in the United States to process this stuff for them. And that's what's important to us. You know what I mean? Dude, if I could take Dark Horse Tackle to thousands of subscribers, we would inevitably need some kind of space. It's never going to be overseas, but we would inevitably need some space to do this. Right now, we're just chilling in a basement packing boxes every month. But that's what these guys are also doing. I mean, these guys are sitting in their garage pouring jigs by the hundreds for us. And, the fun part is, the most fun that I have with it is when the companies have fun with it. So they're they're excited, right? They're like, oh, hey, I've got a couple hundred going out, got a few hundred going out, this many going out to Dark Horse Tackle. Make sure, if you want to get your hands on this, but also some other baits, make sure you subscribe to them or whatever. That's always my favorite part.
Right. I'm not going to lie. Like I said, the last box, not the one that just came out, the one previous, I literally caught a fish on every bait in the box.
Really? On the no skunk box?
It was there was a frog, there was that goby bait.
Yep.
I literally caught a fish in everyone, and the goby I used as a chatterbait trailer.
Right.
Of all things.
Dude, it's
Like that was a really good chatterbait trailer. I was impressed with the way it looked. It was cool.
crazy versatile.
We don't have gobies, so it's a
No.
weird bait to use here because the only lake that has gobies supposedly is Champlain, because I'm in Vermont. So they've infiltrated the northern
Right.
of Champlain. Supposedly, no one's really. I know the state of New York's up in arms, but I'm excited because every place that has gobies also seems to have huge smallmouth because they eat them like potato chips. But
Literally like French fries.
so they're the pan fishermen are panicking, but the bass fishermen are like,
exactly,
because we're like,
So-
yeah, we've seen what happens at St. Clair and Michigan and
right.
Lake Erie.
Lake Erie.
Mhm.
Lake
Right.
Erie is terrible.
Yep.
It's hey man, I love Lake Erie. That's probably my favorite place to fish.
Yeah, I agree.
I do good at Lake Erie, and I'm not an electronics guy. I'm not a I have a John boat, but my buddy and I will go up there every now and then and fish a tournament, and we'll end up cashing a check. And it's just because, dude, I'm a contour reader. Like if you give me a graph and we're just looking at like what looks like a good stretch and we're just kind of 30 yards off of it trying to figure out what's going on here. My initial thought is find a drop, find something that's, more gradual than what's going on, because a lot of Lake Erie, it starts at 1 foot and then it ends up being like 8 throughout like the entire lake. And you find that 8 to 12, like immediate drop, you just stop and start throwing. That's why I like Lake Erie.
I fished Lake Erie tons of times, man. And it's weird how you can go, like you're saying, how far offshore you are and you're still shallow. You know what I mean? Like people will wade fish out there, 20 yards offshore and you're still in 3 foot of water.
Yep.
And you're just waiting for that drop. Like you're saying, yeah, you're just waiting for it.
Dude, I got a
This
funny
is on
one.
Ontario like that too.
I got a goofy story. I was fishing. This is when what's it called? The Live Scope had just came out. My buddy, he was, he's a big tournament fisherman. So these guys are giving him this stuff to go try it out. And he's got a deal through Garmin. So we're trying it out. And we're in like 4 foot of water on Erie, and you can make out an island that's probably 100 yards away, but you can see these fish on this Live Scope. Dude, we got into a school of channel catfish that were in between like 8 and 15 pounds. Like on Live Scope, they're in like 3 foot of water, dude. They're just, and it's so weird because like you're just casting at it. You set the hook, you feel that big bite. You think it's a smallmouth, you think it's something you're fishing for. And then it just starts spinning in circles. And you're like, so I'm fishing 3 to 4 foot of water and I'm catching channel catfish that are anywhere from like 8 to 15 pounds. It was insane.
That's incredible. Yeah.
See, that's
I
the
love
thing
that
is,
lake.
I'm not an electronics guy either. Like, I mean, this is literally the most advanced fish finder I've ever owned. And it
Oh,
doesn't
yeah,
even have
the
side
hooks.
imaging. It doesn't
they-
even have side imaging. It's just
They do
enough.
contour, buddy.
That's all I need.
You read the depth. You go
Yep.
from 12 to 16 foot. You make a little bit of a turn. You start fishing that way.
And this one has the cheat code of it has the 2D down imaging overlay, so it actually
Okay.
marks fish in 2D. So it's kind of nice because it actually marks like arches in the 2D, but then it has the bottom contour of the down imaging, so it hybrids them. So you don't have to use basically both screens. So then I can use mapping on the other screen, like you said, to see the contours, to see where
Yes.
stuff is. Because that's all I look at. Like when I'm prepping for a tournament or whatever, I'm just like, okay, where are these lines really close together? That's
Yeah.
where I'm gonna fish. Because
Navionics is huge, dude.
I absolutely have it on my
exactly.
phone.
Get it, download it on your cell phone, and just study that. For anybody that fishes tournaments, anybody here listening that's a tournament fisherman, download Navi on your phone, especially if you don't have $25,000 in electronics.
Yep.
Because it's in the grand scheme of things, it's a worthwhile investment. And there's some crazy stuff that Navionics is coming out with. They're starting to show like bottom hardness and stuff like
Yep.
that, which that's insane. Like you start fishing those mud bottom, silt bottom lakes, you find that hard bottom. You know,
Yep.
a lot of these silt bottom lakes, they're not deep. Like Zach, co-owner, him and I, we fish a spot, an arm of a lake. It's like 6 foot at its deepest, but it's all silt. But we find that hard bottom, we start catching fish.
That's so almost all the lakes here are that like slime crap that like you drop a jig down there and you're brushing the crap off of the skirt because it doesn't come off. And it's the same thing. You can find those spots, and especially during the spawn, you find where those hard spots are. Then that's where they're going to be during the spawn. But that's honestly the biggest thing that I had to learn. The other thing is what's nice about the Navionics app is you're watching TV. You're like, Mark, and then when you're on the water, you can be like, oh, because you look at that app and it's like, oh, that makes sense. It's by the island. Then you get on the water and you're like, where
the hell am I?
You can't find that spot, but if you have that app, you can pull it up, go to that spot, and drive right to it, and then you're on top of it.
When you're doing your homework, it's easier to study for a test than get out there and go, oh shit. Yep. Like, do I remember what I'm supposed to do here? Yep. Because when you look at it on Navionics, you're like you just said, you're like, oh dude, look at that. There's an island, and there's, you know, on this side, it's a slow contour down, but on this side, it's a point with a 5 foot drop on each side. I know that's where I'm going to go if I have the Navionics app, or, you know, Navionics really needs to send you a check for this right now.
To be honest. Yeah. I mean, if you guys want to hit me up, I'll throw some logos up on the stream.
Exactly.
What's funny to me too, is like, it doesn't matter what your style of fishing is. Everybody kind of usually follows the same. Like for me, like you said, the thing about that depth deal is with a kayak, what I'll do is I'll straddle that line so that I can cast to my right and I'm in 3 feet of water, and I'm casting to my left and I'm in 12 feet of water. And then you just run that edge, because then you figure out where they want to be. You don't have to go fish 12 foot, then come over here and fish 8 foot, then come over there and fish 6 foot. And to kind of bring it back full circle, when you have multiple baits tied on, like you get from your dark horse box, you have the ability to figure out what color they want and all that, but you can kind of isolate yourself down, because to be honest, the one thing I make a mistake of the most is I tend to just change too quickly. Like I don't stick with a routine. I'm just like, nope, they're not here, and then I leave. Whereas if you're covering everything, there's no point in leaving. You might as well just keep going.
Yep.
Here too, everything's like, a lot of our lakes are glacial, so they're just bowls.
Yes.
So everything is like, I don't ever go in the middle, like until it's like dog days of summer where they've completely pushed off the bank. I don't really fish middles much, because I can fish most of the edge and cover multiple depths without ever having to go over there. And I don't have to deal with the bass boats in my kayak.
PJ, where are you from? Where are you out of?
I'm living in Indiana.
Okay. Yep. So I'm in Ohio.
I'm from Ohio.
99.9% of Ohio lakes are reservoirs.
Exactly.
They're all flooded creeks. Mm-hmm. And so if you're a deep water fisherman and you're fishing Ohio and you're not fishing part of a creek channel or a heavy drop in the summertime, I don't know what you're doing. Now, granted, there are fish shallow, dude. Everybody, like, there's a lot of places in these lakes where the fish don't leave all year long. But there's a specific spot that I fish. I live in Central Ohio. I fish Hoover Reservoir. There is a specific spot that I fish that the creek channel, I'm going to guess if you were at a national forest, it'd be the coolest part of the national forest, because it's a big slate wall, and I call it the horseshoe. It's a big horseshoe-shaped bowl where the creek channel runs along the wall. And I'm willing to bet if it wasn't a flooded creek channel, it would just be you looking 30 feet up and seeing a slate cliff. And then there being a creek right next to it. But what it's become now, due to like erosion and stuff like that, is it's gradually become a ledge. So you've got your 8 foot to 12 to 16 to 18 to 22. You get it. You guys understand ledges.
Absolutely.
But, dude, positioning your boat when you're fishing like that is the most important thing. If you're not like positioning yourself to look at this thing at the wall and cast a little bit diagonal to hit every single one of those ledges, you're making a big mistake. I like that because that's what you said about the way you kayak fish. Because like I'm in the same way. I do fish a John boat 99% of the time, but that's the exact same way I fish. I'll look at my depth finder and I'll be like, okay, if I go one way, I'm looking at 6 foot. If I go the other, I'm looking at 12.
Yep.
So let's cover the water.
What's the other thing that's always kind of funny to me too is, and I come from my parents. So growing up, my dad was big into like trolling for salmon and trout and doing the more offshore like downrigger trolling stuff. If you're fishing Erie, you know exactly what I mean. But
the cool stuff.
The cool
come on.
The cool stuff.
So what I've learned from that sport is that sometimes, as weird as it is, the direction you're retrieving the bait can make a difference too. Sometimes literally you cast east and pull west, or cast north and pull south, even if you're in the same area. So what you're saying about boat positioning, sometimes literally you won't catch fish if you're casting along the ledge versus down the ledge or at a 45 or 30-degree angle. Sometimes literally the angle, depending on the wind direction, the current, there's 100 different factors. And that's actually one of the reasons why I actually like fishing for my kayak more than my bass boat. I have an 18-foot tracker.
Yeah.
But I actually like fishing for my kayak better in some situations because I can control my position better because I don't have spot lock. I've just got an OG trolling motor that I'm constantly on, and it's an old motor guide that doesn't lock.
Yeah.
So it's like cable style. So I have to keep like constantly turning it. And I'm like, then my aluminum boat spins around, and then I spend more time fighting with my boat than I do. Whereas with the kayak, with the pedal drive, I kind of just back pedal, forward pedal, and I can kind of keep myself online on that.
Oh yeah.
But it's crazy when you learn that, like, because you would think like, oh, I just point at the bank. I actually made a video the other day about this. It's like a lot of guys I see fishing a bank, they go like the bank's here and they go cast. No, cast and like this, pull it across, because you're covering 40 feet of the bank instead of a foot at a time. And you're going to cover more of that and draw them out.
Think about it, dude. If you're fishing contour and you're throwing right at it, let's say you're fishing 20 foot deep right where your boat is, but right in front of that cast, it's 2 foot deep. It just ends up being 20. You make a 40-foot cast, you're going to hit 8. Let's say you're throwing a crankbait. You're going to hit 8 foot maybe of that. Yep. And you're not going to get that, you're just not going to get the same efficiency out of paralleling that bank or throwing it as an adjacent angle than you would just like you said, just lock it. You don't have to lock in, just throwing it at a 45 or whatever angle, it doesn't matter.
Just it depends on what you're throwing too. If it's deep or diving enough, once it gets to the top, it starts grinding because it's coming up on the top of that ledge and makes that noise. So if they follow it, I've had a lot of times where they're following it right back to the boat, but then when it gets close to the boat, because you're coming up, it hits off that boulder on that ledge and deflects that bait, and that's what causes that bass to freak out and hit it because they think it's trying to avoid them.
Yep, hitting. If you're fishing a crankbait and you're throwing it at chunk rock or boulders, you're going to want to make sure that crankbait is hitting every piece of cover it can until it's the last 5 feet of that cat. Like I want to be throwing my arm out until I get back to like that last 5 feet.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's the thing, is the erratic action. It's funny how like those little things like that. And it's comical because if you think about it, like a lot of people don't tell you that. Like they just think, oh, you throw a square bill and it comes back to me, cool. But they don't realize that thing's literally designed to grind into the bottom as hard as you can until it comes out.
It's meant to roll. It's meant to turn left. It's meant to turn right. It's meant to go right when it's supposed to go left. It's meant to go up when it's supposed to go down. That's the point. That's interesting you say that, because like I do a lot of like tips and tricks like on my own Instagram and like with Dark Horse Tackle. We do it on Instagram or YouTube, whatever it may be. And it's always like my biggest like point that I want to drive home to people is like, the second you see this bait and you go, I'm going to fish it this way, don't. Just fish it a different way. Like you mentioned the goby. So I threw the goby on a extra wide gap shaky head. And the reason why I did that is the first time I threw it, I was like, I'm going to try this thing Texas rigged with like a little bit of a, stopped off leader, like maybe 6 inches.
Yep.
What I noticed is that I got more action when the weight was directly on the bait, and
Yep.
I'd watch it kind of circle down. So I tied it directly to an extra wide gap shaky head. And every time when you would, let's say you're just stroking it up, let's say you're just pulling it 2 foot up, it would shimmy left and right. But then
Yep.
when you drop it, it goes in a circular motion straight down to the bottom.
I was going to drop shot it when I first saw it. I was like,
Yep.
I'm going to drop shot this thing. And then I drop shot it, and I'm like, it looks
it's kind of
okay.
lame on a drop shot.
I'm like, it
is.
looks
It's kinda
okay,
lame.
but it's kind of dead. And so then I
Right.
was like, you know what? Screw it. I got a chatterbait right here. I'm going to throw it on here and just see what it looks like in the water. And that back
Yep.
end, man, it would just it was just enough of a wiggle.
I think the word is titillating.
Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah, I have no
I'm
idea.
not a grammar guy. It sounds like
literally.
a word that sounds good.
I
Sounds
think that
good, though.
video, that video actually hits. I think this week, coincidentally, I didn't even plan that, but
Just the chatterbait video with it.
no, I literally made. So what I try to do when I do an unboxing, and to be honest, I failed with the last box. I try to do an unboxing and then I make a video of those baits. To be fair, a little YouTube like behind the scenes. What happens is if I fish that bait and I catch a fish on it, then I cut that part out and I put it in another video, and then I'm like, hey guys, this is that bait from the Dark Horse box, and then I throw them all together because, again, it's one of those for me being, and this is where like the little guy kind of comes back in. The reason why I started my YouTube channel is because there's a lot of information out there, right? But there's guys like Tactical Bassin, for example. They say things like, oh, during certain times of the year, you need to use a 12-inch bullworm. If I use the 12-inch bullworm in my ponds that I fish, those fish are going to the opposite end of the lake to get away from that thing. That's not their deal. So I wanted to make a channel that was, because a lot of people started fishing during COVID.
Yep.
And they didn't have, like, the joke I always make is I learned how to tie a polymer knot before I knew how to tie my shoes.
Right.
Like, I grew up, there's a picture of me in my dad's Sylvan 17-foot aluminum in my car seat strapped down in the front so he could go trolling.
Right.
Like, so I take for granted knowing these fishing terms, this fishing information. And a lot of times, like, the big YouTubers or anybody who's got content out on the internet, they forget that people don't know how to tie a drop shot. People don't know how to do all these little things.
Right. Well,
And that's why I like to do these like little unboxings. And then that's why I try to do the fishing of the baits, because to be honest, I watch an unboxing and they're like, yeah, this is a cool bait. But then you don't see anybody catch a fish with them. So who cares? Like, it's cool that you see the bait, but personally, I want to see you fish it. I want to see what it looks like in the water too. So then I try to like do a second follow-up video. Like, this is how it performed. This is what I did with it, to give people like that education of, maybe they get the box, but they don't know that they could throw that goby on a chatterbait. They think they only can fish it on the EWG. And that's the kind of stuff that I do, because to be honest, I tinker all the time. I'm constantly.
That's the point. The point is to open your mind. Like, we're not selling you products to make you open your mind. Like, it's not like, oh, it's not like a riddle, dude. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
right.
The goby bait is very similar to a tube. It's just not a hollow body. But you can also, granted, I hate the way it looks on a drop shot, but I know you can throw it as a drop shot.
You could.
You can.
Yeah, you can.
You can Texas rig it. You can put it on a, whatever you want to do. You could, and trailering it, trailering any bait that isn't meant to be a trailer is a bold move in this fishing industry, because people are always going to go, oh, I never thought about that.
Yeah.
Like, I throw a lot of like brush hog style baits on the back of bladed jigs.
Yep.
And I rig them sideways, because when I throw a bladed jig, I want bottom contact. And if I don't want bottom contact, I'll rig it horizontally. But when it comes to a lot of the bigger pages, the bigger YouTube channels, what have you, they're already kind of sponsored by something with like a pre-written deal. It's like, hey, today we're going to talk about, PJ's whatever. PJ was kind enough to send us this bait. This is how PJ wants us to fish it, and this is the fish we're going to catch on PJ's bait. Send us a check.
Yep. One of the best videos I have on my channel, one of the most watched videos, I got bored. So the content creation thing becomes fun when you don't catch fish. So you're like, damn it,
True.
I'm not catching fish. I'm not making a video. That's when I learned this year more than anything was like, well, what am I fishing? I'll just make a video about that technique. While I was bored, and one of the funniest things I did was I literally took a Berkeley gilly and threw it on a buzzbait.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
And I did a video on it. I'm like, this is the Berkeley gilly, and we throw it on a buzzbait. And I caught I did it just to play around with it, and I caught 3 pike in a row. And I was like, okay, this is viable. I'll make a video about it. But it's
right.
Stuff like that where there isn't anything about putting a gilly on a nobody puts anything on a buzzbait other than a horny toad or
Dude,
very limited type of trailers on that bait, man. But there's so much stuff you can throw on it.
Big throw whatever the hell. So I got a buddy named Cody. He owns a company called Jig Masters. He makes what's called a micro buzz. It's a screw locked buzz bait. It's about 3 inches long. It's tiny.
Ooh.
It's like 3/16 ounces. I'll take a 3-inch Senko and I'll screw that onto the end just to give it some meat. The reaction of the bait is in the blade.
Yeah.
So I'll just put on a white Senko and they'll just hear bubble, 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 see a flash of white and be like,
yep.
I'm
it's
reacting.
Just to give them something to hone in on. So they're going for the hook instead of the blade.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. It's actually, I've done crazy crap. I've literally hooked a Kitech on a bobber. I was ice fishing. Just throwing it out there.
I used to do there was a technique. It was just throwing. It's similar to a float and fly, but it's with a Senko. And you would take a Senko with just a couple split shot weights and then a slip bobber.
Okay.
And you tie off your slip bobber wherever you're, whatever depth you're fishing.
Yep.
And you would wacky rig a 4-inch Senko.
Yep.
And then just, hop it in place on that bobber.
Yep.
Dude, it works.
Dude, I did it. I actually paid. It's funny. So this weekend, there's this pond by my house. It's a campground, and they have a pond in the center, and the sites are on the pond. So you can literally launch your kayak right from your campsite.
Oh, nice.
And it has really big largemouth in it, and no one really fishes it because it doesn't look like a place that you would. It's not big enough. It's maybe 50 acres. It's tiny.
Right.
But nobody fishes it because they just swim, they hang out at the beach, they paddle board, they ride around in their floats. No one really fishes it. I look ridiculous because I've got 8 rods in an old town with a fish finder and 3 GoPros and all this gear. So I booked a site there for Columbus Day weekend, Sunday and Monday. And that place, that's where I discovered the bobber stuff. Is it was pouring rain and I didn't want to fish. So I was sitting in my site and I didn't have any actual worms. So I just tied on a wacky rig Senko on a regular bobber and just casted it from my campsite. And I'm sitting under my canopy. And then when the bobber would go down, I would just run out and pull in a bass.
Right.
And it was just something I was just screw it. I could just sit here and watch it and see what happens. And that's the creativity. And that's actually kind of what brought me to the subscription box world in the first place. I've done a lot of them. I did Lucky Tackle Box for a while. I did Monster Bass for a while. And what brought me to doing that was just I get this random stuff in the mail that I've got to figure out what to do with it, because it's not I didn't go to the tackle store to buy it. Cause let's be honest, when you go to the tackle store, you're okay, I'm going to buy this to go with that. And then I'm going to buy this hook to go. You kind of pair stuff mentally when you go to the store. Whereas when you get something, just, you don't know what you're getting until you open the box. You go, oh, well, how do I use this? Cause I got it. I might as well use it. So,
right. That's the thing with Dark Horse Tackles. We try to cater to every month. And everybody who goes to a bait and tackle shop has a preconceived idea of what they're going to buy. Oh, I need buzz baits. I'm going to go buy buzz baits. That's what they do.
Yep.
But with us, it's here's why you got a buzz bait this month. you got a buzzbait this month because, well, they're chewing them. And from here on out, they will be. Ultimately, we do want people to catch more fish because, well, that drives the success of our business.
Right.
That's kind of a big driver is being able to catch fish on the product that we give you. But yeah, it's funny how, anytime I've ever gone to like Bass Pro Shops or any kind of fishing store, I'm like, oh, I need this. It's never like, well, let's see what they got.
Yeah, it's always, for me, it's a little bit different in the sense of, like, for example, my local tackle store just closed.
Ugh.
They just went out of business. So now I have one local, like, actual, what I call local tackle shop, right?
Right.
So basically, that one's more of a deer hunting and like guns and shooting shop. So they have tackle, but they didn't really want to compete because they're only about 15 miles from the other store that was now closed. So they didn't really they didn't keep a lot of the same stuff in stock because why compete when you're that close?
Right.
And then the next tackle option I have is Dick's Sporting Goods, which I'm not going to disparage Dick's, but they don't have stuff that I want. You're not going there to get the niche stuff that I want to get. And honestly, then I end up having to go it online or try to find it somewhere else. So it's I go to the tackle. Like if I go to a Bass Pro, I go there with more money than I should spend because a Bass Pro for me is 2.5 hours away. That's the closest one. So
I don't know about you guys, but I'm just not fond of Bass Pro anymore. So I have one 10 minutes away from my house. And I'm not lying, dude. I've got a competitor that's near there called Public Lands, which is attached to a Dick's.
Okay.
And I find that the Public Lands has a better selection. And that's because Public Lands is not promoting 90% of their fishing section as their own brand.
Right.
Like you go to Bass Pro and it's just like, hey, have you seen the Bass Pro Shop brand shit? And it's like, no, dude, I wanted to have.
I came here for Kitex. I don't need the Bass Pro.
I wanted to have a fishing tackle adventure, dude, and all I'm doing is looking at this.
Let me ask you a question about Dark Horse there.
Go ahead.
I've lived in different places now. I lived in Ohio, and I live in Indiana, but I lived in Alabama. Do you guys do anything like region specific? You know what I mean? Because like up north, Ohio, Indiana, we have smallmouth.
Yep.
Alabama, they don't have smallmouth. They have spotted bass, largemouth. Do you guys do anything like that there for, somebody looking for this here? Western states or, New England states or Midwest, something like that there? I'm just curious. So people who are watching.
Yeah. Our best course of action right now with our monthly subscription box is to make whatever we can as accurate as to what's going on throughout, let's talk about, let's take your book, right? Okay, it's October. Now, granted, it is 82 degrees in Columbus, Ohio right now for whatever reason.
Right.
But, in a typical October setting, you'd be thinking about throwing spinner baits. You'd be thinking about throwing some kind of like a jerk bait or like a flat-sided crankbait or just some kind of moving bait that goes shallow. It's not that we don't. We try to generalize the entire nation.
Right.
Granted, eventually we could probably do something like that, but right now, just with like the subscription gig, the best thing that I could give you guys, to those who are watching and to those who are curious about any kind of catered box, is we are the only subscription box company that I know of that has a build your own box feature. And what that is it's $33, one-time purchase. It's not a subscription. And you get 3 different choices. There's a top heavy, a just right, and a bottom heavy. So your bottom heavy is going to be what we call tier 3 baits. That's jigs, soft plastics, terminal tackle, stuff like that. and you get 4 of the bottom and then like 1 of the top and 1 in the middle. But if you wanted to, cater what we offer to yourself, that'd probably be your best course of action.
Right.
I've done it too. It's a pretty cool, like, it's definitely set up so that like Dark Horse isn't losing the bank either, but like you can pick what you want. Like I've done it a couple of times and like kind of debated on whether I wanted to pull the trigger, but there was definitely like not only baits, but if they had multiple colors, it lets you pick the color that you want if they have that available. And it lets you kind of go through and build a box that like, cause that's something that nobody really does that I've seen. To be fair, and I'm not trying to disparage anyone, but what I've noticed is a lot of box companies usually follow this progression. They start out with a good momentum, and then you start getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper versions of their brand, like Bass Pro, like you were saying. Like I won't say the name, but I was with a couple of them that it started out, I was getting high-end brand name gear and I was liking it. Honestly, some of the stuff that's on this wall came from those subscriptions. And then all of a sudden I started getting more and more, I don't want to say knockoffs, but like their brand stuff. And it's like, I'm not paying for, I don't want to buy your brand. I was buying this because I was going to get random subscription stuff. Like, that's the difference is Dark Horse isn't making their baits. They're working with guys who are making the baits and then putting them in the box.
It's going to be the same, like quality every time. Like it's going to be guys who are putting their like lives into this, man. And that's actually a conversation I was talking to Zach earlier. Like, it's weird because you've got 3 subscription boxes right now, to my knowledge, including Dark Horse Tackle. One of them is so complacent that it's pretty much automatically ran. Because they know they'll get money. They can literally put a turd in a box and the guy gets it in the box and goes, I'm going to be John B, dude. I can't wait to throw this turd.
Yep.
And you've got one company who is putting quality stuff in their box. It's not necessarily American small business. It's mass produced stuff that you can buy anywhere else. And they do a good job. I'm not gonna say anything negatively about that company. It's just that, they do have regional boxes, and that's something that, to me, that's just like over my head. But, that's the reason for the build your own box is that Zach and I talked about regional boxes. I said, dude, I've never fished in California. I never fished in Florida. I never fished in Alabama. Like, so why not? Like, dude, I've got behind me, it's blurred out, but that's because there's a bunch of beer cans back here because I've got a substance abuse problem. No, but like I am cleaning up. I am cleaning up for the weekend because it is box packing weekend and it just looks terrible back here. But I've probably got about $13,000 worth of perpetual inventory that, we've got to get rid of, dude.
Right.
Like that's the bottom line is like, if you're sitting on it, you got to move it. So we did the build your own box for that reason. And like you said, it's not going to be stuff you see everywhere. It's not going to be stuff that you can get in a lot of stores. And that is 100% by design. Like, we want you guys to, back about 2 years ago, we wanted it to be, I want you to get a hold of Binya Outdoors or PJ and go, hey, I really loved this bait. How can I get more of it? And they're like, awesome, let me sell it to you. And now we do offer some of it, but the point is to still have you guys go to those bait companies and buy from them.
Right.
It's all about virtue, man.
I had the regional boxes. I will say, being from the Northeast, I don't think the guy that was picking the stuff for that box was from the Northeast.
Gotcha.
I wasn't getting stuff that, like, I was getting bait types that work up here, but I wasn't getting colors that matched anything that I could use. So that regional thing, to be honest, that's actually a respect thing. Like, you guys are like, you could do it. You could do it. Sure. It would be a gimmick. You guys could probably sell more and get more subscriptions, but that actually probably says the most about Dark Horse is that you're like, dude, I don't know how to fish in California, so I'm not going to pretend to make a box for people that I don't know how to fish for.
I'm
Like,
not going to sit
that's
here and
not
tell
worth it.
people bullshit, man. I can't.
Yeah.
Like, dude, I have to bullshit enough. Like, just with a lot of other stuff. Like, why?
Yeah.
The one thing that I love doing. Why am I going to sit here and be like, oh no, dude? Like, no, seriously. Like, there's gobies in Alabama.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
come on, man.
Yeah.
But I mean, the one thing about the goby bait, the reason why we put it in there is you got to think about the guys not throwing goby baits in Alabama. That's everybody. But the one guy throwing a goby bait in Alabama might be the one guy catching fish.
One of the guys that I do, another Vermont YouTuber, he made a comment to me that actually blew my mind, and it's a really simple comment. He goes, "Fish don't know what they're not supposed to eat."
Right.
And it's actually true. Like, that's
Mhm.
like, if it looks like a bait fish, it doesn't matter if it's hot
This-
pink. They don't care if it looks realistic enough.
This is the back of a dip can lid. You bend this thing into a triangle and put a hook on it with a swivel at the top, and you get
You'll
it to
catch a
go the
pike on
certain
it.
way. Guess what? They're going to eat it, dude.
Yep.
They're not going to care if it was Grizzly or Copenhagen or Skull. They're going to go, why is that thing shiny and going left to right?
Yep.
I
Yeah,
have
I
to
literally
kill it.
talked to a buddy of mine, and it was like, sometimes I was actually thinking about doing this as a topic for a podcast. I think color matters 10%, and confidence in that color and that presentation matters 90%. I think if you throw the wrong color, but you have the confidence and you think you're going to catch fish and you fish that thing, you're probably more likely to catch fish on that regardless of what color it is. Like, sometimes that doesn't matter at all.
You're right. Like, you're right. I tell people all the time, presentation is pretty much the only thing. Presentation and any kind of like reactability, right? Like,
Yep.
You can get erratic action out of a Texas rigged Cinco. It's a very boring bait. It goes up, it goes down. But if you let it hit the bottom and you just start shaking that rod tip and making it bounce kind of all over the place, they're going to wonder, why in the hell, why is this doing this, man? Like, why? Like, I want to touch it, but I don't have hands, so I guess I'll use my mouth.
Yep.
And then they eat it. And it's a simple equation at that point.
It's funny how, like, the one thing I always have to remind myself is we humanize fish too much. Like, we think that the fish has this whole processing plant in their head. Like, they're gonna look at this and go, "Oh no, that's a yum dinger. I don't eat yum dingers. I only eat Yamamotos." Like, they don't freaking know. Like, it doesn't. We sometimes, to be honest, a lot of it is just, if they've seen 50 Senkos, they know the last time I saw one of these things, my face hurt for a week.
Yep.
That's all they know.
Yep.
Like, they know that was danger the last time they saw it. That's literally the end of their they're no different than a deer. If a deer never saw a human, you probably could walk up to it and pet it. But because they've interacted with humans and humans have been a danger, they're like, yeah, I'm out of here.
Exactly.
And
I saw my mom die because of one of these dudes.
Yeah.
Like, I was right there. No, I think it comes down to, like, people always talk about natural presentation, right? What in the hell is a natural presentation in a Cinco?
Yeah.
Texas rigged.
Yep.
Quarter ounce, sinking a foot a second.
Yep.
I've never seen a bait fish sink 1 foot per second in my life.
I mean, it's like you were saying, buzz baits. What the hell is a buzz bait in the natural
What's a buzz
world?
bait? Like,
what is it? There's nothing like that in the world.
It's noisy, it's annoying, and they're like, why is this doing that? I think I should eat it.
It's funny because I think sometimes, literally, I don't even think they are trying to eat it. I think they're just so pissed off that they're just want to kill it. Like, I know one thing I do is I'll sometimes, when the bite gets really tough and they're like really lethargic, I'll cut a Senko down lengthwise, make it flat.
Yeah.
And then wacky rig it so it falls stupid slow.
Yeah.
And it's just like, I think they don't even want to eat it. They're just like, get out of my face.
Right. They see it falling at 6 inches every 10 seconds, and they're just like, why is this here? Like, my winter presentation's a lot different than yours, but I fish the same way all year. So you talked about confidence. dude, I'm a power fisherman, like mainly like power finesse. Like the most powery I'll get's like a 1/4 ounce to a 3/8 ounce jig.
Okay.
But I'm throwing like 1/8 ounce swim bait like heads with like a 3-inch swim bait, and
Yep.
I'm running that like a crankbait, and then I'm following up like once I get close to it, like let's say I'm throwing at structure, I'll follow up with like a Nico rig or like a Texas rig Senko.
Yep.
But like when I'm throwing in the winter time, because I love winter fishing, and a lot of people always like look at me funny when I say that. When it comes time for the water to be wet but still very damn cold, that's probably the best time for you to get out there as a fisherman, because those fish are stacked up. Like they are with each other.
Yep.
They are looking for bait, and they will travel with each other to find that bait. I fished a tournament. It was a later in the year type tournament. It was like the middle of November, but the day started out like 28 degrees, dude. Like it was cold. And I get to this spot, and I'm looking at I've got a hook as well, by the way, on my John boat. I'm not a big electronics guy. I see it on my hook, and I go, okay, I see the contour, I see the lines. I also see that the water is 42 degrees. And I pitched at it, I brought a couple baits through it, and I said, well, that's fine. And I sat on this spot all day. I just sat there and waited. I got on my phone, and I just sat there and watched YouTube videos. And then once like 11 o'clock rolled around, the sun was hot enough, and I pulled back over the spot, and that's when I see up here in the 6-foot water column, I've got a ball of bait fish. And down here in the 12-foot water column, I've got those bass that were there all day. And the second 11 o'clock rolled around, from 11 to 3, I did nothing but catch fish on a Texas rigged Senko, dropping it straight down and dead sticking it. And people they're like, I don't know how, the reason, the how is I stayed there. I knew they were there.
Yep.
The why is when the sun gets to a certain point in a winter day and the bait fish start moving around, that's when the bass move around. They see
1 to 2 degrees of water temperature increase changes everything.
The water temperature was 42 degrees at the start of the morning. It was 48 when I pulled back up, because I pulled off. I literally dropped an anchor, dude. I pulled off, dropped an anchor, and just sat there for like 3 hours. And I'm like, I'll be back. Like I'll just sit on it, because I don't want anybody to come over here. Because dude, I knew what it was. Like I'm in a lake where your predominant species is bass. You've got some catfish, but catfish don't hang out like that. No. They're not hanging out like that. And it was just one of those gut feelings. I'm like, I can't move from this. And I don't want somebody pulling in and starting to whack them. Because it was a mixed bag, dude. It was crazy. It was smallmouth and it was largemouth, just hanging out with each other.
We have some lakes down here that are the weirdest places, because traditionally, smallmouth and largemouth like entirely different environments. But there's literally a couple of lakes up here where you run down a bank and you'll pull a smallmouth, and then you'll pull a largemouth, and you'll pull a smallmouth, then a large. Like they're just chilling together, because that's where the bait is. But I think sometimes, honestly, I think that's a good. I didn't really think about that. You kind of just made me think of it. Is sometimes I think your best bait is the time of day.
Yep.
Like, because I actually, this time of year, I don't fish early mornings anymore. I stopped fishing mornings. In the beginning of the year, the spring, I'm up at freaking 4 a.m. and they're daylight, and I fish all day. But then come midsummer, I don't fish all day because I like not being dehydrated and feel like I'm going to die. Right. And then I fish more like early mornings or later evenings just to avoid the heat. This time of year, I get up at like 9 o'clock, have my coffee, get my breakfast, leave at like noon and fish till dark, because I find that the bait fish aren't doing shit in the morning. So if they aren't moving around, bass aren't moving around, there's really no point in me being there, because that sun hasn't had a chance to warm that water yet.
You know what I do in December? If I've got 30 degrees, 30 degrees, 30 degrees, 30 degrees, 48 degrees, 48 degrees. And then 30 degrees, I'll go on the last day of that 48 degrees.
Yep.
And I will wait until 2 in the afternoon. And I'll put my boat in and I'll get to the spot 2 hours before the sun goes down and whack them. Just
It's
go
insane.
out. It's bite windows. Bite windows are a thing. And it becomes more of a thing in the wintertime because, like you said, man, in the spring, you know, you've got what 60 degrees throughout, dude.
Yeah.
Like you've got great weather. Now, obviously, they're not eating at night, but when that sun comes up, they're like, "Oh shit, boys! Like, hey, wake up!
Yep.
It's time to eat." But
Yep.
in the wintertime, they're like, "I'm not moving," and then the sun comes up, and they're like, "Okay," and then at the end of the day, when the surface temperature of the water is warmer than the air temperature, they're like, "Oh shoot, dude! Like it's they're not as lethargic as you think. Bass will always eat, but
Yeah.
you've got to wait. Like it's all about timing. You know, you find that in the winter time, it's easy to catch fish, and people always complain about winter. And I'm sure you get rough winters in Vermont. I'm sure it ices over.
Oh yeah.
It doesn't really ice over here where I'm at, and with it not icing over, it's kind of tougher to fish, really, because like you're fishing from the bank or a boat,
Yep.
and it's just tough. But you know, you've got to wait for that time where you think like, okay, it's been, you know, 48 degrees and sunny all day long. The sun's been beating down on the water. I know spots from the fall where bait fish have accumulated. I wonder if on those spots that the bait fish are still there and the bass are still accumulating. And
Benefits to that too are the fall. If you find them in the winter, they're probably there in spring.
dude,
Like you've already found their spring home.
From like October to like March, it is literally just that on my home lake. Like there's some spots, there's a northern end of my lake, it gets as deep as maybe 10 foot, and that's the creek channel side. And a lot of them don't hang out on that creek channel side. And dude, they'll be there all year. They'll sit in bushes all year long. The water could be 92 degrees. They're sitting in a bush. And that's just, you know, I think it's just because those guys don't know, like there's an entire, you know, thousands of acres right behind them, but that's where they get their bait from.
Yep. Yeah, I definitely so last year I'm actually mad about it. So last year I went up to I went to the Finger Lakes and I took I bought a bass boat last year and I made this whole big plan, content plan and fishing plan. I was going to fish the Finger Lakes for the first 3 days of a week. And then my parents were coming up, and I usually every year my parents used to run a boat slip on Ontario on the New York side, and we would do the king salmon fishing thing. It was in around Labor Day weekend. Get up there, I fish Cayuga, I fish a couple of the Finger Lakes, and then I have a motor issue. So I basically shelved my boat because basically I'm in a week before Labor Day, and the chances of getting my boat into a boat mechanic the week before Labor Day are zero. It's just not going to happen. So I shelved my boat all year, shelved my boat all winter. Well, that was the winter. Last winter was the time where guys were going out in January, February, catching smallmouth on Champlain. Like it never froze. It never got cold enough. Now, granted, Champlain, there was some lakes that got a little bit of ice. There was actually a lot of like death last year because people were fishing sketchy ice because they were so desperate to go ice fishing that they were out there on like 2 inches of ice, spanning open water with plywood to get to their favorite spot. It was stupid. But Champlain, they were catching them, you know, and fairly shallow too, because I mean, shallow for Champlain, but Champlain's actually a river. Like people don't realize it. Champlain's technically a river. It's not really a lake. So it has current. So it's hard for Champlain to freeze solid. And when it's not cold enough to even freeze a little bit. So I didn't get to take my boat out this year. I'm going to start earlier. I'm probably not going to fish extreme cold because it is an outboard and I worry about the freezing of the motor crap and stuff like that. But it's the cold water stuff for us is the only thing that I take advantage of is that during that icy time, no one's fishing a lot of the ponds and stuff that I fish because they're not good like ice fishing lakes. So like those fish kind of get a break. So then in the spring they're stupid again. Like they have a very short memory. So when you come to like May, they forget that a Senko is a problem. They forget that I've been actually playing around with Helamites
Yep.
a lot, and I've been throwing those on a Ned rig, and they forget that those were a problem, and they stop ignoring the baits that they by this time of year they're just want nothing to do with. So, but yeah, it's the cold water thing. I've debated on moving south, but I also don't like the heat, so it sucks.
I hate it.
It's like I lose. Like I could move somewhere. PJ just kind of experienced that, like went from Ohio, moved down south, and now he's back up north again. But did you get going fishing, PJ? By the way, I know you said
I
you were
am
gonna go.
still waiting. I need my Indiana driver's license.
Oh, you can't buy a fishing
buy-
license until you have
So I can
that.
buy a license. So they're supposed to come within 2 weeks. I'm still waiting. But I mean, I got my kayaks sitting literally right here beside me. I am chomping at the bit, waiting to get out on this damn lake. And then these colder mornings just have me itching to make a trip up to hit Lake Michigan, get some steelhead action in here on one of my days off. So, dude, I mean, expect something within a month. It's a minimum.
Dude, I went on an adventure on Wednesday. So I took a random I basically burn. I get 4 weeks of vacation and I burn it all on fishing trips, like just random weekday, because I like to take like a midday off because that's when the fish will kind of calm down. So I took a Wednesday. I fished 3 hours from my house, met up with another content creator, and we were making footage. So we get there. I had a reel that had ghost drag, so I was like spooling it out on the water because it's the easiest way to fix it. And I'm sitting there spooling it out to reel it back up to get it tight again. And this guy literally uses, it's the weirdest thing I've ever seen. He uses an ice fishing jig rod for his finesse rigging. That's what he loves to use, this little, like, I think it's like literally a 4-inch, 5-inch rod with a little spinning reel on it. And he just uses that to cast all of his wacky rigs. He casts like small tubes. And so I'm like, dude, why don't you cast out? I'm just going to pull this line out of here, get this line tight again, because it was a Texas rig reel that I wanted to try. Had like high vis on it, stuff like that. So he casts and he goes on. And I'm like, dude, there is no way you got a fish on that thing. He had a 4.5-pound smallmouth first cast. And he's fighting it on 4-pound test on an ice fishing jig rod. Things bent all the way to the like a U. So we catch that one. Now I'm screwing with the reel again. He casts out a jerkbait, catches a landlocked salmon on a jerkbait. And then he catches another 2-pounder. I still haven't gotten a fish. I fished all day, didn't catch a fish. And I promised this story to PJ. So then we switched lakes because there's 2 lakes in this area. And because it's so far away and they were kind of like bucket list places I wanted to fish, I go fish the second lake, didn't put my plug in my boat, launched my boat. We get about 40 yards offshore. My auto inflate life jacket goes poof.
Oh,
and I'm
God.
like, what the hell? And I look back and the water is level. Like the dugout area of my bass boat was level with water and it was starting to flow onto the deck of my boat. So I learned I don't have an auto bilge in my boat. I have a manual only. So I had to turn that on and trolling motor to shore because I was in so shallow I couldn't really drop my big motor. Not to mention my gas tank was technically underwater in the back of my boat. So I didn't want to like turn on the big motor and suck water into the tank. So then I get to shore, load the boat, drain it, and then proceed to catch one smallmouth. So I drove 150 miles one way, 3-hour drive to catch one 12-inch smallmouth and watch my buddy catch a PB smallmouth and a fucking landlocked salmon on it. And he wasn't like reeling the jerkbait. He was legit like jerking a jerkbait and caught a landlock in the same zone that all these smallmouth were. Oof. In 8 feet of water. Oof. I don't know what the hell this landlock was doing in 8 feet of water, and he was on a grass mat. He was just chilling with the smallies. Like he was hanging in a grass mat. That's what he was. My buddy was literally casting up to the edge of the grass mat and working a jerkbait like you do. And he ended up pulling this thing out. And it was just like the craziest day. So I ended up actually making a YouTube video called Snack City. I found a parody song to the Rack City rap song.
Nice.
Because my buddy sits there and eats the entire time we're fishing. Like at one point he pulled out a bowl of chicken and rice like his
Holy
Tupperware bowl of like food. Like he comes with the randomest meals. So I pick on him about it. So I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna make a video out of this just because I have no other content.
Jeez.
But yeah, that was Wednesday. And then yesterday I went out and caught like, I don't know, 7 or 8 largemouth, but they were all little. I mean, little is perspective, but probably like.
Did you have fun,
pounders.
Mike?
That's, it's funny. Yes, but fun is different when you're a content creator. Fun is I caught fish, but I made a video. Like I've literally not caught fish and still had fun because I made a good video that day.
Right.
But look at the story that you got.
Yeah.
Exactly.
The story is half of it. You know what I mean? That's half of the adventure.
That's why I run 2 cameras now, because I've had beavers like jump off cliffs to try to like scare me away from their dam. I've had like Canadian geese like come at me and hiss, which I didn't even know they hiss. But
really,
they will. Yeah, they're literally if they get close to you, they'll go.
Oh yeah, no, like, I was saying really that you didn't know that they did that.
I had no idea, and then I got close to one day, and I was like, "Yeah, okay, yeah, you can have it. It's yours." I'm like, "Yeah,
don't mind me, buddy. I'm just trying to live here."
Yeah, the loons are like nuts in the spring too. During their spawn, they're aggressive as hell. The one thing I wish I'd gotten on camera was the one time I didn't know this, but one of the places I fish, they stock it with trout, and I was just chilling, and I always wondered why there was like 2 or 3 benches like right at the boat ramp, like literally like park benches just lined up along the front edge of the boat ramp looking out on the water. I always thought it was kind of a weird spot, but I was like, maybe it's for the bank fishermen. No, it's because that's a bald eagle nesting area, and they like eat the trout off the surface in the mornings when they come up to eat. So I'm following the school of bait. I could see like that, that swirl that the water does when all the fish come up, and I'm following it, and the trout are blowing up, and I'm in there behind it throwing, reaction style baits, trying to find the bass that are chasing that school. And I feel wind on my face, and I look, and there's an eagle, like National Geographic style, coming down over the top of my kayak, picks a fish up and takes off for the tree.
That's insane.
And that was the moment when I realized I can never go fishing without a camera.
Right.
Because dumb stuff like that happens where you're just like, if I'd gotten it on footage, it would have been, an epic video, and it wasn't even fishing. That's the cool thing about I think I've said this before, but that's the thing I like about fishing is that, not like disparaging other sports, but football is you learn the technique and the technique. Baseball is you learn how to hit a baseball, you learn how to catch a baseball. Our ball thinks and reacts to us.
Yep.
So you can go fishing the same lake 5 days in a row and have entirely different experience every day.
Yes. Well,
that's where you need different baits and techniques. You got to learn how to adapt to the environment every time you go out.
You want the ball to come to you.
Right. The bass don't follow the playbook. No. You can have the playbook if you want, but the bass don't give a shit about your game plan.
No, and they don't care about the Bassmaster playbooks made up either.
Yeah.
I tell people all the time, stop reading the damn book, just go fish, dude.
Yep. Like just nothing replaces that experience.
I mean, you can get a general understanding of how to use a jerkbait reading a blog, tap, 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 wait 3 seconds. But sometimes they're going to want you to cast that thing out, and you reel down half the cast, and then you tap all the way back.
Yep.
It's difficult to make tips and trick videos to catch more fish, because if it's something you have not caught fish on already, you're immediately questioning it.
Yep.
Because, the Texas rigged weightless Senko has worked for you for 14 years.
Yep.
And I'm telling you to stop doing it that way. And you're like,
yep. No. The confidence transfers down that braid to that hook. I'm telling you, it really does. There's something about fishing it, but I know jerkbait's actually one of those baits. I've never actually caught a fish traditionally using a jerkbait. I've trolled them and caught bass. I've chuck and winded them.
Yeah.
And so, technically, in some cases, actually how I work a frog would probably put most professional bass fishermen into an aneurysm, because I don't use my rod tip. I do it with my reel.
Yeah. I
just stutter reel. A lot of the times I find that is more effective for me, because I'm not really trying to walk it. I'm just trying to create some sort of
Yeah.
Like I actually think sometimes that perfect walk is less alluring than a thing that's like,
Yeah. Well, no,
'cause
it's not
like something
about.
fleeing.
It's not about perfected walks. It's definitely more about erratic action. I've actually I was throwing that huck frog that was in the box from August, and what was funny is the best reaction strike I could get for the water I was fishing was rod tip up. I'm just reeling it and I'm going tap 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 tap
Yep.
tap 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 tap, and I'm buzzing this thing, dude.
Yep.
I'm burning this thing across the water, and they're just killer whaling it. But
Two
if
of the
I
fish I caught yesterday were that way. I was actually using a creature hog, Texas rig, and I would cast it on top of the pads, and I would just burn it until I
Yep.
got to the edge, and then let it fall off.
Yep.
So like all those pads start bouncing, the fish look up and go, "What is that?" They follow it, and then they see this thing come straight down in front of them and
Yep.
smoke it.
Deductive thinking works.
I do the same thing with the frog. I'll do that with a regular hollow belly. Is I'll throw it like I'll almost fish it like you're supposed to fish like a horny toad.
Yeah.
Like I'll throw it over top and I'll just slow reel it and just let it plinko off all of the pads and crap and slop. And then if I find an opening, I just pause it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then it
works.
hits that water, makes a ring, and that fish that was following it, trying to figure out what was moving all the stuff over their heads, like, oh, fish.
There it is.
Because they don't actually think it's a frog, is from what I understand. Like the logic is they
No.
think it's a bluegill that's like on top of the water, like a subsurface or basically just barely, they eat frogs, of course, but
Sure.
I don't think they really care, honestly. I think
You ever
they're-
seen how fast a frog can swim though?
Yeah,
And they don't
They're
swim
moving.
on top of the water.
no,
They're not going like this on top of the water.
they're not jumping from pad to pad. What's
No.
really crazy is I've caught a frog on frogs,
Oh yeah.
which baffles the hell out of me. I've literally caught bullfrogs on a hollow belly frog. I'm like, what were you trying to eat? Like, what did you think this was?
They were reacting, dude. Same way the bass do.
Yep.
That's what it is. They see something. They don't know what it is, but they see it, and the only way they can feel it or find out what it is by their mouth.
Yep. That's funny. All right, boys. We've been going on for an hour. I don't know if you have any more questions, PG. I kind of blindsided PG. I was like, hey, we have a guest. I don't know if we're going to have him or not.
Surprise!
But I've seen a lot of your guys' Dark Horse lives, and I was like, yeah, he'll be perfect for the show because,
Appreciate it.
like I said, I don't really I have an actual more formal, like literally my other podcast that I'm a co-host on, we talked about forward-facing sonar. We kind of did the whole hot button topic.
Oh yeah.
Do a little bit more organized topic-based stuff. This one's more like me and PJ are like, hey, let's do one Thursday. Like it's just kind of random. It's more or less I created this whole like podcast thing last year because, and being from the north, you can appreciate it. I can't fish in the wintertime when it's icing over. So if I can get people on here to talk fishing, I at least get to live fishing world for a little bit until I can get on the water.
Fishing.
So, and that's what I did. That's what it started, is just, and then I mean, I'm friends with some people. Like I text Mikey Balls all the time. I talk to Alex Rudd. Like I talk to those guys and I get them to come on. And actually Bobby Roast Beef from Jigs and Bigs was one of the first guys.
Nice.
I went on his podcast
dude.
and then I ended up bringing him on mine. I fish with Bobby sometimes too. I've been down
he's a
to
good
Bass
dude.
and fish with him a few times, but it's more about just getting people together to talk. If you have, I was going to mention, I know I'd said this in a message before too, but if you have any of the small bait companies that are looking to just promote, their brand, let me know. Send them my way. I'm
100%.
all about like getting guys. I don't have a huge footprint, but at the end of the day, this is on the internet. So, and I make sure to put the brand name in there. I put links to their website. So they go on YouTube and they type in XYZ bait company. They're going to see that person talking about their brand. And that's, to me, it's all about, I would rather see, not that I, mind Berkeley and all the big companies, but I would like to see these small guys succeed because, to be honest, they put a little bit of care. You see when they paint something, you see these guys that, these bait painters are legit, man. Like they bleed in these things, man. These things are, and it's cool is like, and personally, like I like custom painted baits specifically because they're not the same. They could paint 6 they're not a machine. So there's going to be a little bit of variance from one to the next. So you could buy 5 of them and they're all going to be slightly different, which means that's still a custom bait every time, even if it's the same pattern every time.
I've got one from the flat side that we had this month. It's like a sexy shad, but he like goofed on it. And I don't know if he meant to goof on it, but the pattern's like more drawn down the entire crankbait. So I just took it for myself because, like, I mean,
Yep.
You couldn't really quantify it as like the exact bait he was trying to paint, you know. And I don't know if it was like, because this guy sends us a lot of like his like, hey, if you're ever looking for extra colors, here's a couple. I don't know if that was like the gig on that, but I was like, ooh, it's very similar to one that we're putting in there. I'm not gonna mess with it. I'm just gonna take that one for myself because I mean, realistically, dude, I have to catch fish on these baits because if nobody else is, I have to.
That's another thing I saw in the live streams, and it was like you guys were talking about how you were out testing the bait.
That's all we do.
And
that's
like
all we do.
That impressed me a lot because that's the whole thing with the unboxing. Like I will go through the box and I'll say, this is a square bill and this is a plastic and here's a cool color and it looks like it'll work. But I don't necessarily endorse it until I go on the water. And when I go on the water, I say, yeah, I caught this on the box, the item I got from the Dark Horse box.
Dude,
like
if
we
don't instill that kind of confidence into you preemptively, like what are we doing? Yeah. Like, you know, if I can't tell you like, hey, over the past couple, now granted, in the YouTube videos we do, I'm not going to go on a 4-minute rant about one specific bait. I just can't. No. But you know, hey, it's a bladed jig trailer. It's a great jig trailer. You could throw a Texas rig. You could do it this. You could do that. You could do this. That's enough for you to.
Yep.
5 ideas is enough for you to be like, okay, well, maybe I'll listen to what Josh said and throw it on a chatterbait.
Yep. That's what I base my whole channel on. Is like my channel. I show. Go on my channel. You'll see shorts of me bird's nesting reels. Yeah. You'll see shorts of me breaking off hooks. Like I don't want to just show you a 6-minute video of me catching 5-pound fish. I'll show you the videos of me catching 12 inchers. I'll show you days. I've literally posted videos where I'm like, I didn't catch anything today, and this is why. Like I want to be real with my viewers because at the end of the day, I won't teach a technique until I've caught fish on it. I won't promote a bait until I've caught more than one fish on it. Because I'll be honest, I catch one fish on a bait, that doesn't mean shit.
Blind squirrel finds a nut, dude.
You could literally catch a bass on a Coors Light can with a treble hook if you work it right. So that doesn't necessarily tell me it's gonna work. It tells me if I catch more than one, even big fish, sometimes it's just different, so they eat it because it's different. It doesn't necessarily mean it's gonna work every time. I've made that mistake and bought, 4 or 5 of different colored baits because I thought that they were gonna work because they worked one time. But I like to also, though, at the same time, I like to endorse it. Like, this is made by this. This bait looks good in the water. This is how I fished it. This is how many fish I caught on it.
Exactly.
Try it. Check it out. You know? And that's...
You just got to believe me at this point, dude.
Yep. So... But yeah, unless you got any other questions, you did say it's Boxing Day, so I want to make sure I get my box on time. So that means I'm gonna have to let this man go so he can get the stuff.
Boxing Day will be Friday. It'll be Friday. I don't even have all the baits yet, dude.
Gotcha.
No, I've got nothing for you guys. If you guys have anything for me, I am.
The one question I had is, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's for somebody who's watching, Josh. If they are a bait maker, how would they reach out to you and get their product in your hands so you can get it to some other customers?
So we're very rigorous with this. Send us a DM or send us an email. It's Dark Horse Tackle across every single platform. It's darkhorsetackle@gmail.com. Dark Horse Tackle, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. It's the same deal throughout the whole thing. Send us a DM, and we will do our worst. No offense. It's just part of it.
Nope. Just in case there were some viewers out there that,
absolutely
might want to get their stuff out there. I just wanted to let them know how they can get in touch with you.
Absolutely.
Perfect.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's it, guys. I'm going to end the stream right here, but I want to thank Josh for coming on. I've had it scrolling across the bottom. It's their website. I personally get the box. I pay for it. I'm not sponsored. I literally
We don't
doing
do
the
any.
same-
We don't
Yeah.
do any. So
yeah, I literally
we have to make some money.
I subscribe to it, and I like it so far. And I will be honest, the next time I'll unbox, I'll show it and I'll tell you whether I like. And I'm brutally honest. I tag Dark Horse in all of them, and if I don't like a bait, I'm also gonna say I don't like a bait. But
dude,
that's kind of how I handle the stuff. But yeah, if you guys want to check them out, they do have a website. The build your own box would be a perfect way to see the baits, to see something if you want. I will tell you right now, there's a couple of different items in there that I'm probably gonna buy that I didn't get. So just check these guys out, and we'll definitely have Josh back on. Maybe even bring Middle Jones on, and we can have a long conversation with everybody. I don't know if PJ can handle him on top of it, but little intense in the live streams that they host. But yeah, thank you guys for coming along with us. We are going to be back again in a couple of weeks, so stay tuned for another The Spawn podcast.
Thank you guys.